this horror, for that is what it was, took place while all of society was watching. But because it was off the scale of everybody's belief system, they didn't really come to terms with it.
Jimmy Savile's larger-than-life story started in Leeds in 1926. He was a miner during the war, a pro wrestler, a semi-pro cyclist. He drove the Savile brand to stardom on the back of rock and roll. In the dance halls of the 1950s and 60s, Savile's predatory behaviour appeared to be well known.
One person said a big joke with Jimmy Savile was that he was either going to be famous or he was going to be locked up for having sex with 14-year-old girls.
After Savile died, biographer Dan Davis tracked down those who knew about the early abuse.
He had a reputation as somebody who preferred girls at the younger end of the spectrum, and other people I've spoken to have confirmed that the younger the better was his motto when it came to women.
So there were obviously a trail of people who knew about this 50, 40, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Welcome to January the 1st, 1964.
Savile's link with the BBC began when he joined Top of the Pops in 1964. His Radio 1 career started 4 years later.
I arrived at Radio 1 September 30th, 1973. By the time I arrived, he had transcended us all. Without a doubt, there were stars like Tony Blackburn. There were influential people like John Peel, who was the most important man in popular music in the world for about a dozen years. But in terms of stardom, it was Jimmy. Jimmy Savile!
By the early 1970s, the BBC was filming Jimmy Savile as he crisscrossed the country on a series of charity runs and walks. And he always had at his disposal a camper van, or just a Range Rover with a mattress in the back. The BBC's nationwide programme caught up with him on the shores of Loch Ness as Savile searched for the monster.
Have you seriously seen anything of any interest out there?
Yes, she was about 17, and she had long legs and long blonde hair, but she wasn't a monster.
Savile was pursued by fans everywhere he went.
You lurker! Come here!
Nationwide reporter Martin Young joined him on another run from Carlisle to Newcastle.
I think in a sense it was the beginnings of celebrity culture. Jimmy could have who he wanted. Jimmy appeared to just pluck one from the masses.
Good morning, Jimmy. Good morning, my friend Martin. How are you?
How are you feeling?
Martin found Savile in his camper van, lying on the bed with a teenage girl. They were both fully clothed, but for the reporter, it confirmed the rumours he'd heard were true.
I thought he was a pervert.
Even that?
Yeah.
Did you think about reporting it or anything like that?
No, never even crossed my mind. And I'll take my share of the blame for that.
Another nationwide reporter dispatched to cover a charity walk was Bob Langley. On 2 occasions, he spotted young girls coming out of Savile's caravan.
They would be, I would say 12 or 13. They could have been 14. They certainly were not 15. After they had gone, he indicated to me in a nudge-nudge, wink-wink sort of way that he had just had sex with them. I didn't believe him. I said something like, thinking it was a joke, I said something like, I think it's a little bit on the young side for you, Jimmy. To which he replied, and I can't remember the exact words, but it was something along the lines of, when you think that way, you're finished.
Since the ITV revelations, Bob has wondered whether he should have reported what he saw.
Supposing I had gone to the police or to the BBC, what would have happened? The answer is nothing would have happened. He would have said it was a joke. Can't you take a joke? And that would have been it.
If nationwide journalists didn't think to report Savile to their bosses, what about BBC staff who worked on another of his nomadic shows?
We are back home again with today's edition of Savile's Travels. The atmosphere of this enormous boat shooting down this wooden
They went round the country in the caravan and obviously other things like a BBC car, and they'd stop and say to people, what's your favourite record? We'll play it for you.
Listen, how about on the radio we shall play you a nice piece of music? What sort of music would you like? Oh, good Welsh.
Paul Gambaccini worked in the office next door to Savile's Travels production base in Radio 1's London HQ. The programme's production assistants told him some disturbing stories.
They would come back from these Savile's Travels outings, and they would report that unpleasantness had occurred.
What sort of unpleasantness?
We were told that he would go off with a institutionalized young woman.
A senior Savile's Travels member of staff even gossiped openly about their star's illegal behaviour.
I'm sure he regrets it now. He had a big mouth and would talk to the record company promotion people about things that went on in the caravan. So you see that there was no real attempt to cover up the fact that things did go on.
Again, though, he never thought to report Savile.
So what? I, a junior DJ, am supposed to get up there and say, my senior's a perv? They're going to laugh at me. It never occurred to me.
But word about what was happening on Savile's Travels was reaching BBC radio management. In 1973, the then Radio 1 controller, Douglas Muggeridge, ordered his press officer, Rodney Collins, to find out if the stories were true.
Douglas Muggeridge said to me, look, I've heard rumours about Jimmy Savile and perhaps some problems with underage girls. Do you know anything about this? And I said, I've heard nothing, Douglas, nothing at all.
Rodney Collins asked around his Fleet Street contacts to see if they had heard anything he could feed back to his boss.
They all came back with exactly the same answer. I mean, exactly, which was that they'd heard rumours about Jimmy Savile, but they knew of nothing. They knew of no inquiries going on by their newspapers, and they'd certainly not heard of any police interest.
Around the same time, Derek Chinnery, then a Radio 1 department head, was asked by Douglas Muggeridge to confront Savile with the allegations. An informal meeting was set up, with executive producer Doreen Davis acting as a witness. Savile flatly denied having sex with underage girls.
On reflection, it was very naive of Muggeridge and me to do that, because the man was obviously going to deny it, even though we had no reason to, no real concrete evidence to prove that anything was up. If the man's denied it, you don't then go and hound him at the time. I know it sounds terrible that we didn't, but there was no reason to do so at the time.
Ah, wonderful, wonderful. So marvellous to get away from it all, ladies and gentlemen. Here we
It was an opportunity lost, a chance for the BBC to stop Savile's abuse almost 40 years ago.
I suppose this probably wasn't the BBC's finest hour. We only have to look at the press, television and radio over the last 3-4 weeks to see that.
Derek, God bless him, being on the 4th floor rather than on the 3rd floor. And that's the only difference it requires. He wouldn't have heard the plaintive cries of the disappointed program assistants on the 3rd floor. It's probably that simple, you know. It's just one floor in an office building makes all the difference in the world.